Hello, and welcome to Leadership PRN. This is Dalhousie Faculty of Medicine's podcast for established and emerging leaders. My name is Dr. Lara Hazelton, and I'm one of the directors of faculty development for the Faculty of Medicine. Today, I'm very pleased to have with me Dr. Ming-Ka Chan. Hi, Ming-Ka.
Hi, Lara. It's great to be together again.
So I know you from different organizations that we've been involved with and conferences and so on. And I'm really pleased that you've agreed to join us on the podcast today. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself and your interest in leader development?
So I'm a pediatrician. I work in hospice medicine, and I also do an outpatient clinic in Sikawayasik Cree Nation. I'm a clinician educator, so I focus on leadership education and in social justice and anti-oppression work. And I'm also an executive coach. So that's sort of my work life. I have the privilege to be at the University of Manitoba and to live, work, and play on Treaty 1 territory. So that's the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and the homeland of the Red River Métis. So that's currently otherwise known as Winnipeg. In terms of my identities and privileges, I am of Chinese descent, cisgender, heterosexual. I'm married to a community gastroenterologist and the mother of 2 children. And so I have many blessings. And I came into leadership education. For me, it was about supporting others to thrive. And I feel that's important both in my clinical work, for patients, families, their support systems, as well as communities, as well as in my academic work. So with learners, the teams that I'm part of, and I think also the organizations and even the system. How can we support each other to really thrive, have a sense of belonging?
Part of the reason I wanted to talk with you today was because, as we've talked about, I've always been impressed by your ability to connect people, and maybe that comes from that supporting others to thrive. Do you think?
I think that's probably what grounds me. I will say one of or two of my core values. One is around justice, and so that became a clear path of both clinical and academic work, as well as in my personal life. And the second was learning. And so I think that in the connections that I have, the networks that I'm part of, they've really enabled me to learn. And when I'm able to learn, I think that's part of the thriving and part of the fun.
You've been involved with a number of organizations that promote medical education and leadership. Do you want to tell us a little bit about those?
Sure. So they're really quite varied. Probably the longest standing group that I've been part of is the Canadian Association for Medical Education. So leadership development's been a big part of that. It's called CLIMB, or the Canadian Leadership Institute for Medical Education. We actually developed part 2, which has a focus on social justice 2 years ago. And those are leadership intensives. So that's one model of leadership development where we come together, we focus on leadership development for 3 to 4 days, and really have some dedicated time to both reflect, get feedback, and to immerse in learning. And so that's probably been the longest standing. I did a lot of resident and learner leadership development work. And through that, and through the Royal College work that I was part of in re-looking at CanMed's 2015, we started in 2013. And through that process, we re-looked at the time, the manager role, which then became renamed as the leader role. In doing so, we came together as a group, colleagues at the University of Toronto, as well as a team from the Royal College, really having conversations about how we could advance leadership. And through that, we designed a summit that started meeting annually, including patients, learners, healthcare professionals, and faculty across different disciplines, really having the conversation about what leadership education for physicians could look like. And that was the Leadership Education Summit for Physicians. That's been an annual meeting every year prior to the International Conference on Residency Education. And then out of that, we realized that we really need to form a group and a learning community to have conversations. And we formed a group called Sanacondu, which stands for Health Leadership in Esperanto, universal language. And we've really had a lot of fun together. I think that's when we probably first, one of the many places that we first connected, Lara. And we've designed resident leadership modules. We have a online virtual monthly series that's open access for anybody to join to have conversations around leadership, and also social justice, as well as other topics important to healthcare. And we actually partnered with another organization that I'm part of, the Equity and Health Systems Lab, that is led by Jerry Maniette. And that's also a multinational group. They're focused on health equity and social justice. And so we partner to have a series called Critical Dialogues for Action, where we look at the intersection of leadership and social justice in health systems and beyond. And so those are some of the organizations. The last one I might mention is Leads Global. The Leads framework is a leadership framework that was created by Graham Dixon and Bill Thole. And this is the global arm. And through Leads Global, there's opportunities for partnerships and leadership development on a global scale. And one of the exciting things is that they're developing is a entity, I'll say, the World Health Leadership Network, which is just beginning, and been a lot of fun in terms of trying to look at how we can support leadership development across the globe, to really look at how we can co-create solutions towards better health and better healthcare.
Why do you think that networks are important for leaders?
I think networks are important for a variety of reasons. First and foremost, really being that as leaders, as followers, as citizens, we really need to have relationships and trust. And so I think networks are one of many ways to help build those connections, to build those bridges, and set up environments that will facilitate us to co-create together, and to really design things for the better. And if I were to think about it from a justice lens, and to advance the work needed to really be an anti-racist and to apply an anti-oppression lens to the work that's needed, then I think about it as a way to facilitate having diverse perspectives, to hear from diverse peoples who have very different lived experiences and ways of thinking and being, and really being able to learn from that.
Do you think of yourself as an extrovert?
So I'm actually not. If you look at some of the scales, I think I sit on the fence, so to speak. Mainly when I think about, if we call ourselves an extrovert, or as I understand it, it's one where you gain energy from connecting with others. And while I feel that I really enjoy a time with others, when I think about how I recharge, it's actually spending time in reflection, and really having some time for myself to think through what I need to do, at least professionally. So it's an interesting tension. I think I try to be strategic, and in the time and the type of networking I do, to be judicious. So I don't really thrive in the cocktail conversation or with large groups, I try and have deeper conversations and ask questions, I think, in terms of how I have conversations with people. While I'm fluent in English, it is my second language, and I still struggle with understanding what English words mean and just how diverse the meanings are for different people, both professionally and personally. And so I struggle with that dichotomy sometimes of extrovert and introvert, because it's certainly for me to network and build connections. I feel that it consumes a lot of energy well spent, no doubt, but is something that I have to work at maintaining.
So is it something that you learned, would you say, or that you taught yourself?
That's a good question. I feel that because of my curiosity and love of learning, that was the buffer, and I certainly recognize that it was safe, I suppose, for me to immerse myself in different environments. So while I'm less comfortable in a large group, that it was valuable for me to seek out those environments where necessary and explore them. And so just to be curious rather than, I suppose, worry about how I might be received or perceived, and just to try things out. So I think that attitude helped in just being curious. But I'll say that I'm probably more curious in a smaller group setting. It'll take me a little bit of time in a larger group to settle in and contribute more meaningfully, if that makes sense.
Do you think about how to bring people into organizations? Like I'm thinking about, I guess, having seen you, as you say, in your role with CAIM and with Sanacondu and so on. Like, are you, when you meet someone for the first time, are you thinking, how can I engage this person in some of the important work that these organizations do?
Yeah, I think I'm always, I think first and foremost, I'm curious about what they might be doing and where the linkages may be. I feel that many times there's so many areas that I'm not familiar with, or I should be, but I'm not, or not aware of the work that different groups are doing. And some of that I think comes from the fact that we still do maintain some of the silos. And so bridging those silos is important to me. I think I naturally do try and see how there could be a connection, or simply, sharing information about as a mutual exchange, and seeing where that might take us. Whether that I'm as strategic as you say, I have to mull a little bit about that. Again, I think it's in context, when there's clear alignment, I think it's easy and it's energizing. I do also recognize that there's times where I didn't realize that they didn't know about this group, or that they didn't, they're in medical education, but they didn't know about CAIM, or they are at my university and yet I hadn't met them, and they're also an educator. There's just interesting new connections that can always form. And so I'm always curious about why that is, and how we can facilitate some of these, not necessarily always formal, but both formal and informal opportunities to just connect with each other and have conversation. I'm not sure if being in pediatrics, and we have a pediatrics hospital, that, in terms of my clinical work, I'm well connected to the pediatric community, but less so to the I guess to the adult colleagues. And so, interestingly enough, throughout my career, I have had some roles with, for example, other types of health learners, physician assistants, for example, international medical graduates, where it facilitated my engagement with other groups outside of pediatrics or my clinical sphere of pediatrics, and whether that was just a natural opportunity for me to build connections. And I feel, a real privilege that I was able to do that work, but also the outputs that it allowed in terms of some of those connections and building relationships. Some stronger than others, but just the opportunity to connect and hear how, different disciplines did things. And that it definitely is never a one size fits all.
It sounds from what you're saying that a lot of this for you it is driven by curiosity. It is it happens, naturally, let's say in some way, even though it is something that you're kind of aware of. It reminds me of in some of the leadership programming we offer, some people seem to have no trouble finding mentors, and other people struggle. And I have a feeling it's something to do with the individuals. And I've read a bit about part of the reason I asked you about being an extrovert. So apparently, extroverts do better at finding mentors, perhaps not surprisingly, than introverts. So it's difficult because some people this comes very naturally. They connect, and then other people, they really struggle with it, and I think it does hold them back in some ways.
No, that's a great point. And in some ways, what helped me was because I became more explicitly passionate about, justice and speaking up about it. It meant that I then had to even seek out more diverse voices and be very both deliberate and explicit about why. And I think that why really helped me. So if you need to have voices and other people are either introverted or not trusting of us, of me as a health professional, for example, or whatever identity I might have that doesn't lead to, instant trust, so to speak, which we all know is difficult in and of itself. I think that with me understanding that I'm going to have to do that work, the work is important, and to actually seek out different perspectives really helped to motivate me, even if I felt challenged in that environment, to put myself forward, or any uncertainty. I could make that my priority, that in order for me to be able to continue and advance the work for justice, that I needed to take on that as a responsibility of where I have some power and privilege, and step forward, introduce myself, make that connection regardless of the setting. But that I would say I had to learn and, reframe and remind myself every time I'm in that environment. And it's true too. I think sometimes we have, to your point about mentorship, I think that's an incredible way to develop as a leader. And one of the things that I will say is that many people don't seek out mentors or peer support or sponsors. And so I also see on the flip side, perhaps now that I'm more senior in my career, but to actually reach out to individuals. And I used to think, well, how could I, it's presumptuous of me or arrogant of me to think that I could mentor somebody. So now it's just, reaching out a hand and say, if you have questions, I'll just be explicit, and, feel free to reach out. Here's my contact information. And at least I've made, the first attempt, and to let them know that there's somebody, if they so wish to pursue, to build a connection. And that took some time to learn how to do that. And I think we also spend a lot of time in leadership education focused on, the formal courses, and which are extremely valuable. I spent a lot of my career in formal, longitudinal courses, or um, episodic courses, etc. But I do think, having mentors and peer support to be in that environment where you can reflect and then seek out feedback is incredibly important as developing as a leader. And we need to emphasize that more. And I think organizationally, or as a system, think about how we can provide those environments to support it, if that makes sense. To have gatherings that have a social and a networking function, be it virtual or in person, and really harness that for a variety of reasons.
I completely agree. I think it's such an important part of leader development, and yet it's often what we leave aside compared with deciding what curriculum to include or something like that. I also know that it really it's difficult for many people to feel like they can network. Do you have any suggestions or thoughts for the people who say, I'm not comfortable with meeting people, I'm not comfortable with networking? What are your advice to them?
It would be important to start on a small scale. And so I think we all have individuals that we admire. And that might be one way to be extra motivated, is so, if you're a hero, so to speak, if that's the right term, or somebody you really admire that you'd like to be your mentor, you come into contact with them, whether it be at a meeting, or they've come to speak to at your school. I would ask for opportunity. Um, Usually they always share their contact information. I would reach out. And time again, I've heard from individuals that I have respected throughout my career. And they always tell me how much they love to hear from somebody, um, and how much they value that. And it's, and it's doesn't have to be that a relationship professionally will form, but that, a point of contact is always a great starting point. And I think once you get one under your belt, then it just gets a little bit easier. It's not going to be for those who find it challenging. I think it's always going to be a work in progress, but I think just to try it. And again, for me, as I mentioned, that need to really hear from diverse perspectives led me to be more motivated, and feel committed to trying to grow my network. I don't think I naturally thought about it like, okay, I need to grow this network. What I am deliberate about, though, now is trying to connect some of my networks that I'm part of together, and also to strengthen some of the connections, to really think about. And so now there's always a burden of email, but when something really interesting crosses my desk, I forward it to people. And usually I would say 10 to 20% of the time that one of those, somebody within that group or two will not have received the message, didn't see it, will really appreciate me telling them about it. And that could be a job opportunity, to a resource, to, an interesting paper, to your podcast, anything I think that can be of value. And you think that everybody in your circle knows. And so that's just one example of trying to make, those are very loose connections, but just to share ideas, and, start that as being a habit, to connect people. That might be another strategy, I suppose.
Yeah. Those are great suggestions, and I feel like I could talk to you forever about networking because you have some, like I said, I think it's natural in some ways for you, even if maybe you don't see it that way, but also some real experience and wisdom on this. So, thank you for coming to speak with us today, Ming-Ka. Greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's been a great conversation, and it's always kind of neat to reflect on our journeys and our mutual journeys together. So thank you for the opportunity.
And that's another episode of Leadership PRN. If there is a topic you'd like to hear me cover or someone you'd like me to speak to, feel free to reach out to me at lara.hazelton@dal.ca or lara.hazelton@nshealth.ca. Until next time, take care.